Consents to use and disclose. What are they for and how do we get them? In this video, we're going to talk about the consents to use and disclose information, specifically what they mean, when we want the client to grant or deny them, and our process for entering them in the software. There are currently 3 consent questions in the tax software, which you'll find on the e-file page below bank information. The first 2 questions go together, and they grant consent to use and to disclose tax information to foundation communities. The IRS places restrictions on who FC can share its annual summary statistics with. This includes data like average AGI, average EITC amount, and total refunds for the season. Foundation communities would like to share this information with the Austin community, including all of you, to get the word out about our tax preparation program and to help us reflect collectively on each tax season. We need to get consent from every taxpayer to include their tax information in these statistics. That means our goal is for every client to grant consent to the first 2 consents, to use and to disclose tax information to foundation communities. Now that we know that we always want clients to grant consent to use and to disclose tax information to foundation communities, let's talk about how to complete these forms in the software. In order to grant their consent, the taxpayer will sign a laminated consent form available at each station. Let's take a look at the laminated sheet that will be at each station. On one side of the sheet, you'll see both consents we need granted, the consent to use and the consent to disclose. We need both consents to be granted for us to actually be able to include this information in our published statistics. We need the taxpayer and spouse, if filing jointly, to sign and date for both consents. When you've gotten to the page to grant or deny consents, briefly explain to the taxpayer what these 2 consents are asking for. The top section of the page summarizes what we're asking for: to create and share summary statistics with stakeholders in support of our fundraising and advertising efforts and volunteer promotion. We do not use any information that could be used to identify the taxpayer, and we will never sell anyone's information. If the taxpayer grants consent and signs in both places using the erasable marker, the preparer will enter a PIN and the date in the software for both consents. Just pick any 5-digit number. The taxpayer will never need to remember it, and it will also print with the return. After you've entered the PIN and date for both consents, you can wipe down the laminated form to erase the signatures. We are not required to keep the signature once the taxpayer has granted consent. However, we do have to give the client the consent pages that generate with the print set for their own records. In case the taxpayer does not grant consent, select Deny in the software and move on. No PIN or additional steps are necessary. We will have our most recent tax season statistics summary available on CTC resources, as well as a document with the consents and talking points for preparers in English and in Spanish. These are intended to be tools for you to use as needed. In summary, we always want the taxpayer to grant consent to the first 2 of the consents, to use and disclose tax information to foundation communities. Finally, the 3rd consent is the consent to disclose tax information to VITA TCE tax prep sites, and our default is to deny this consent. This consent has to do with carry forward information on a return. With or without consent, a taxpayer can return to the same VITA tax site, and their basic return information will carry forward from year to year. But normally, a taxpayer visiting a different site, even within the same tax program, would not see any information carry forward from year to year. Granting this 3rd consent in the software allows a taxpayer to visit any VITA tax site nationwide and have their basic tax information auto-populate in the software. Carry forward information can be helpful and save some time, but it isn't required to prepare a tax return. Our policy is to automatically deny this nationwide consent, which is also called global carry forward. If the taxpayer were to specifically ask about the consent and decide to grant it, the taxpayer would physically sign the consent form on the very back of the intake sheet, and the preparer would enter a PIN in the software. In all other cases, we automatically select Deny in the software and move on to the demographic questions. On the back side of the laminated sheet, you'll see a list of demographic questions. These are questions the preparer will need to directly ask the taxpayer, and we've included these questions in writing, in English and in Spanish, as an available tool. Feel free to ask the taxpayer to indicate their answer to these questions with the erasable marker while you're entering other information in the software. Once you've entered these answers to the questions in the software, you can erase the entries on the laminated sheet. Don't forget, the FC print sets automatically include copies of the consent forms. No additional signatures are necessary on these printed documents. Just make sure you send them along with the client for their tax records.